Thank you for listening to our podcast on routine with Alex and Vanessa. Today I'm joined by Iman, who's a child behavior specialist, to talk a little bit more about routine, the impacts, and the importance about it in our children's lives. Hi, Iman. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So routine. On the podcast, we talked about how the importance of routine. Vanessa was sharing how she was very unflexible with her routine, and how, as me as well, I became a little bit unflexible. Alex, I think, was the least flexible of the three of us. I think. Um, but I want to talk about routine. I want to talk about the importance of routine, and how maybe it does change as your kids get older. So let's start with the importance of routine. So when you have kids, and I shared in the first, I think maybe it was 6 months of their lives, there was no routine. It
Mhm.
was, a free for all. It was survival. It was a chaotic environment. But then at 6 months, when you introduce solid foods and maybe you do a little sleep training, and then routine kind of starts to organically fall into your home. So, is routine important? Does a child feel safer with routine? Tell me about routine.
Yeah. So what I've learned about, child development and also with my experience working for many years with children, I think routine is very important, right? Routine makes just the day go easier, and especially because children don't have the concept of time, right?
Mm.
So for them, knowing when we are and what time it is during the day, it's routine that gives them this sense of like, you know, the day.
Yeah.
And um, having a consistent routine with activities happening at pretty much the same time is something that they're actually thriving. It's really helping them understand what's going on, and yeah, it gives them a sense of security as well, because they're able to know that at that time they're going to have, their lunch, and after lunch, they
May have a
different
nap.
may have a nap,
Yeah.
and then after nap, they can play a little bit, and then so yes,
It gives them
routine
a
is
sense of their day. It's not just like a black hole for them, basically. Yeah, and I totally get that. And I had shared on the podcast that routine was scary for me because I thought, it was a huge undertaking on my behalf, and I had to establish the routine, and then they had to obey the routine, and there was just a lot of back and forth. And kind of, I gave the example of like the Von Trapp family, like you blow a whistle and it has to be, we have to eat at this time and we have to sleep at that time. And so for me, routine was a scary thing because I didn't implement it. I didn't know it. I didn't have any tools on how to implement it.
Mhm.
But then when I talked to Vanessa, whose kids are older, she said, when you do establish a routine, you can also plan your day and you can leave room for things that you need to do.
Exactly.
So that was really helpful.
Eh,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's something I want parents to understand as well. Routine is good for your child for sure, but the routine has also to be good for you, right? It has to be both ways, right? So yes, for example, your child is having nap time, right? So during nap time, take the time to do things, you know, for yourself as well. So routine is not only one way to help your child, but it's also something that you should use for your advantage as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then this brings us into the, I guess, flexibility of routine.
Mhm.
So, my children are still young. They're 3.5 and one and a half. And, now that you're saying this, I'm getting flashes of my eldest asking me questions like, is it nighttime? Is it daytime? Like, it's clear if it's nighttime or daytime, but
Yeah.
she'll still ask the question.
Yeah.
Is it nap time? Is it dinner time? Like so when you said they don't have concept of time,
Yeah.
I really like that really resonated with me because
Right.
she was asking me all these questions. And for me, it was so obvious. I'm like, can't you see it's daytime? The sun's out, you
Right.
know? But for them, it's like they don't know. They have zero concept of time. They're going by what you're telling them to do. So you're kind of guiding them through time. Um, and I just came up with that when you said that, so that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Um,
I wanna say something
yeah, tell
about
me,
that
tell
because
me.
when I was working with kids,
Mm,
right, it was, I had a class of 4-year-olds, and, it really I remember that moment because I was like, "Wow, routine is so important for them to understand what's going on," because there was, a little boy in my class that usually he always comes around 8:30 in the morning, right? So he sees like when he comes back in the classroom, we were playing for a little bit, then we were having snack. After snack, we had circle time. During circle time, we're doing calendar. Like everything for them, like they need the same thing, like calendar. When I forgot to do one step,
they
all
would
of the
remind
kids
you.
were like, "Oh, Miss Iman, you forgot to do this thing or this thing." I'm like, they're actually right, I forgot, you know? So they were very, like, specific into all the details of the routine. So, usually that boy came at 8:30 in the morning. So, one day he had an appointment, a doctor appointment. So, he came in, I think it was around, like, 10:30, right? So, he comes in the class, and then, I tell him, "We're doing this activity," so he joins in, and then he's like, are we having snacks soon? Are we having circle time soon? And I'm like, it's almost time for
For
lunchtime,
lunch.
right?
Yeah.
So, like he was like confused and like what is going on because he didn't come at the same time and he was actually waiting for the steps of the
Mhm.
routine for him to understand
Mm.
what time it is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I had to explain it to him. You had an appointment this morning, so that means you came later. Snack time was done. We already did it. You were not there. Circle time is done. We did it already. Now we're doing this activity, and after it's going to be lunchtime already. He's like, lunchtime already? He
Yeah,
was so
yeah,
confused, right? So
yeah.
this is where like we can see that routine is very important for them. Yeah.
And also it creates it gives them cues. So I was sharing that, bath time leads into bedtime.
Yeah.
So my youngest, also my 3.5-year-old, knows that once mommy says it's gonna be bath time soon, they know after bath time it's gonna be bedtime. So you have your resistance, you have your but at least they know what's coming. Um, and I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's helpful for them to also prepare for what's to come,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So if I were to just kind of throw it at her and say, "Oh, well, it's bedtime," she would like start screaming her head off,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think it's helpful also for them to kind of know what's coming so they can mentally prepare themselves, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think what's helpful too as a parent is use routine as a way for your child to collaborate with you.
Mm,
So instead of like giving orders and being like, it's bath time,
mm,
you can ask questions. What do we usually do after
dinner.
eating
Yeah.
dinner, right? What do we usually do? Oh, we take a bath.
Oh,
Right. It's time to take a bath, right? So instead of you always feeling like you're telling
yes.
your child to do this and that and don't do this and that, you use the routine for them to understand what's the next step.
Huh.
And they actually love that because they feel like they kind of have it
Included.
included and they kind of have a sense of control, right?
Yes.
Over what's next.
I didn't think of that. You just gave me a really good tip.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's really
Because I
helpful.
always feel like I'm telling her it's bedtime, and it's
Yeah,
like she has no sense of control of her own life.
right.
So let's talk a little bit about the flexibility of routine. So I shared with Alex and Vanessa that when we go on holiday, routine flies out the window,
Mhm.
except for my 18-month-old who still needs her naps. And if she doesn't nap, it's like, so she needs that. Like that's for like physical need. But for my 3.5-year-old, she was, going to bed and anytime she wanted, and it was fine. It was holiday. Like, it was, I didn't see more tantrums than usual. Um, but I do remember as a new mother, I was super unflexible. And we were sharing that with our husbands, it was a little bit different. The husbands kind of well, why can't we just do this and do that? And I'm like, well, no, because if you lose the nap window, then there's going to be this consequence, and then the consequence is going to fall on the mother. And so not being flexible, I think, is something that we all shared at a certain point.
Mhm.
So how do we know when to be flexible, how to be flexible? As your child grows, Alex mentioned, there's different routines, there's different flexibility. So how do we manage flexibility and routine so that we're not constrained and like living in this cage?
Right, right. I think it's completely normal that at some point you have to really follow the routine because you know that it's good for your child and it's good for the whole family, right? Because like you were saying, you understand that if this is not happening, nap is not happening at the good time. Well, she's not going to be able to sleep, and then she's going to be cranky, and then she's going to have tantrum, and then she's not going to want to eat, and then
Yes.
it's just like an you know how do you say, like
Yeah, a never
a
ending
never
circle.
ending,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, and but also routine has to be, like I said, also good for the child, but also the parents, but the family as well, right? Vacation, obviously, when you're going on vacation, you're gonna have less routine than you do at home, which
Hmm.
is completely normal. But then again, for example, when you're on vacation, maybe nap time is still gonna be there because nap time is very important. So I would say sleep is probably the main,
Non-negotiable.
yeah, would be the main thing that you would really keep the routine for
Mhm.
sleep. So nap time, and then try to put your child at bed at a good time for him because for him, yeah. Because yeah, sleep is important. I would say eating too, like meal times. Try to have a sort of consistency
Mhm.
into mealtime, like when it's time for breakfast, and then snacks are important as well, and then your dinner before going to bed. Those two are important to keep as a routine, but the rest can be flexible, right? And then it depends of what's going on in your family. It depends as well of different things. For example, you're having a new baby coming in the house, right? So obviously the routine is going to be challenging. It's normal and it's okay. You're going to find a new routine that works for the whole family eventually when things get calmer. Um, you have a new job. Yeah, it's stressful and you have to wake up earlier in the morning. Routine is going to be a little bit changed. Um, there's different things that can happen, which is okay and normal. So you do have flexibility
Yeah.
as well. Um, Other example I have in my head, one of my friends had her arm broken,
Mm.
right? So she needed help, and I came to help her in her house. And because of her arm, we decided to put bath time before dinner. Usually they're having dinner and then they're having bath time. But what we did is when we went to get her child at daycare, on the way home, we explained to her, right?
I was just gonna say that. So I think
Communication
c'est
is
ça.
important,
Yeah.
right? So we explained to her and we told her, today is a special day. Today we're gonna have bath before dinner time because they call me Tati Iman.
Yeah.
So because Tati Iman is here, so we're gonna have bath time before, and then we're gonna put our PJs on, and then we're gonna have
Dinner.
dinner, right? So just the way we explained to her, she was excited, and things went smoothly after that. So there's obviously moments where we have no,
Yeah, adapt.
yeah, we have to adapt,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I think that what you said really hit the nail on the head is that I think you have to explain it to them because as we said before, they don't have any concept of time. So if bath time happens too early, they're going to think they have to go to bed right after.
Exactly. Or they're like, I'm not eating today.
Yeah,
What's going on?
exactly. So and I find that to be true as well because um I have to tell my 3.5-year-old, let's have a bath before, but you can play after. Doesn't mean you have to go to bed right away. Um, and sometimes with Maddie, I do change it up a little bit. Obviously, I don't explain it to her because she's too young, but
There you go.
but
Yeah.
I do explain it to her. Anyway, and she and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I have to say that when we're on the go or when we go to a birthday party, like sometimes you just have to roll with the punches and go as routine kind of flies out the window. There's like these cheat days, or I don't know what you want to call them, that happen because life happens, and we have to adapt the way that our family works on that day.
Mhm.
So, but I think that the key of what you said is the communication part,
Yeah.
because even if the routine changes, like the physical routine of the activities, as long as they're in the know, I think it will run smoother because at least they'll understand why this is happening.
Mhm, mhm, exactly.
So,
And like you said, it depends also how old the child is,
yes,
right? So if
yes.
he's younger and he's not really aware of like, you can communicate, but I think does he really understand? I don't know. But when the child is older, obviously communication is important. Yeah.
So Alex shared that when her eldest came back from camp and needed a shower, and she said it's a shower day and he didn't want to have a shower anyway. So Alex shared something that I obviously don't do because my kids are too young, but she includes them in the you can choose your shower days or you can choose your TV days, whatever it was. But they did it as a family. They had like a family
Mhm.
meeting, and it was
Mhm.
so because I don't need to do that now. That already scares me for the future because I'm like, oh my God, that's so much work. Now we all have to sit down and like build a schedule of when they're going to shower because they have to be in the know. So
Yeah.
my brain kind of goes that direction.
Right.
But I think, as you said, like, we adapt when the moment comes, when it's our time,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So I don't need to stress out about that right now.
Exactly. Because if we start stressing about things that are not
Yes,
happening now, I don't think it's a good
I'm not
idea.
gonna make it. Yeah, 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 yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So okay, so now I think just to finish on routine, it is adaptable. We shouldn't
Mhm.
be too hard on ourselves. Um, you know, they have to not to be extremely rigid, but to still remember that routine are cues for our children, and it is a concept of time for them, and to communicate when the routine does change really goes a long way,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Can I ask you, what are the top questions that your clients ask you about routine in your profession?
Oh, wow, that's a good question.
One or two or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Um,
Do they ask you to build a routine for them?
I do
Okay.
I do that. Like I said, especially sleep,
Mhm.
right? The bedtime routine, because I think at that point of the day, parents are tired. And, you know, one thing that comes often as well is about um, the routine of bed. So after bath time, usually, parents bring their child in their bed, and then there's reading books, right? So I remember a client where that moment was very difficult because the child wanted more books and more books and more books, right?
Mhm.
So the routine just never
Dissipates. Yeah.
dissipates.
Yeah. I'm very familiar with that.
And this is where
Boundaries.
boundary there you go. I was going there. This is where I had to, tell her like, "Okay, but how many books do you think you should read?" Right? She's like, "Well, now we're reading like 5 and 6 books." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Don't you think that's maybe a little bit too much?" Right? She's like, "Yeah, I think so because, he's just asking more books and books," and she's saying yes and yes and yes. I'm like, "What about just, how many books are you willing to read?" She's like, "Well, not more than 2 books." I'm like, "Okay, so let's keep that in the routine, right? Tell your child, you know, um, mommy is only going to read 2 books, but you can choose which book you want to read, right? We're going to go together and choose the 2 books. And after when I'm done reading those 2 books, there's no more books and it's time for you to go to sleep." Right? So that was a boundary that we needed to keep consistent so the child understood. And I had to prepare the parent as well that the child is going to probably have a tantrum, right?
That's that's what we're afraid of. That's what we're
Yeah,
afraid of. I'm like, I'd
yeah.
rather read 5 books than deal with a tantrum.
Yeah, yeah. The tantrum is gonna be there. But you have to understand that if you keep that
Okay.
limit,
Okay.
that boundary, right? At one point, the child is going to understand that you're not flexible with the quantity of the book. You're flexible maybe with the book he's choosing,
Yeah.
but it's only 2 books, right? So those are, little things like that in the routine, that transitions, right, in the routine as well, that can be hard. So in the morning, for example, I'm getting my child dressed to go to daycare, but he doesn't want to put his shoes on,
Yeah.
or, so I think this is really where my help is necessary. Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe it doesn't as well. Sometimes we're like,
Yes.
it's sometimes
Yes.
we're, like, so scared of a tantrum, but then we put the limit and the child is like,
Yes.
we're like, "Oh,"
Yes.
right?
Yes. And in terms of flexibility with routine as well, we had said, you know, if we skip nap, or if nap's not at the right time, they're gonna have a tantrum. It's like mothers always predict the future 10 steps
Mhm.
ahead, and obviously it doesn't happen like that all the time because 'cause we're not clairvoyant, but we're so stressed and anxious and scared about what we're gonna have to deal with in the future that I'd rather not take the gamble, you know?
Yeah.
So, I think that happens a lot. Like, routine, um, sets my expectations as well for my child. Like, I know what I'm gonna get myself into if I abide by the routine. But
Mhm.
like you said, children aren't robots, like, they'll have a tantrum when you least expect it. Like, it's not routine is important, but I don't think it makes your child a robot where they're gonna abide by it all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Iman. I really appreciate it. It was really insightful.
Thank you.